What are the reasons annexed to the fourth commandment? The reasons annexed to the fourth commandment are God's allowing us 6 days of the week for our own employments, His challenging a special propriety in the seventh, His own example, and His blessing the Sabbath day.
This class covers question 62 of the Shorter Catechism, and this is the last question that the Catechism devotes to the fourth commandment. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. If you've been following along in the previous questions on the Sabbath, and if you're a Christian, there's a certain response that's probably registering or should be registering in your heart, and that is, wow, the Lord has actually given us a wonderfully delightful gift in the Sabbath. So rather than the thought that, well, this is a restrictive thing, this is a burdensome day because we're not allowed to do all sorts of other things and we're required to do such and such, the Christian's going to respond very differently. The Christian's going to say, this is fantastic. It's liberating. The law of God is indeed liberating. Always liberating. It's telling us, listen, you get a day off. All of the grinding of your 6-day work and all of the other things that you give your attention to, you are in fact allowed to put aside. You don't have to think about all of those things. So you may have all sorts of schoolwork that you're trying to get done, and you may have to work really hard for 6 days and spend a lot of time on Saturday in order to get all of your studies mastered. But you come to the Sabbath and you say, I'm free. All of that stuff is laid aside. I don't have to think about all those demands. I don't have to take up any of that stuff. It's all gone. I'm not permitted to give it my attention until Monday morning rolls back around. And therefore, there's something wonderful. The Christian loves the Lord. We love the Lord Jesus Christ. We love our triune God. And there's nothing more precious to us than Him and His Word and His worship. And the Lord is saying, we are given a whole day where we don't do anything else but enjoy Him, glorify Him, seek Him, be with Him, have fellowship with Him. This is indeed a delight to us as a Christian. And so the Catechism ends by asking the question we've seen a few times now, what are the reasons annexed? So again, children, if you've missed some of the other classes, let me just remind you the word annexed means addition. So when a city annexes a portion of the county, they're taking that portion of the county and they're adding it to the city limits, right? So what are the reasons added? What are the additional reasons that are given to this commandment? And it's no wonder that the Catechism takes this up, because there's actually more reasons given in the fourth commandment than in any other commandment. There are more reasons annexed to the fourth commandment than in any other commandment. And perhaps the reason that the Lord fortifies this commandment with more reasons is because He knows that we are more prone to break it. And so He's reinforcing it for us. Our Puritan fathers would say, if the Sabbath goes, the church goes, and the whole country goes. And so the devil has, from generation to generation to generation throughout the centuries, the devil has applied particular force in his devices to unhinge the Lord's people from the Lord's day. Because if you can get rid of the fourth commandment, the church is going to be weakened and the society is going to crumble. That's a fact. And that doesn't take much genius to see, does it? If the Sabbath is given to us as one whole concentrated, undiluted day of worship and of seeking God's face, then If that's taken away so that either it's reduced to just a very small portion of that day, or it's laid aside altogether and treated like the other 6 days, you can see the spiritual impact that would have. If there's a whole day concentrated to seeking the Lord, and you can get rid of that, then the spiritual impact on the Lord's people and on society in general will be far-reaching and devastating. And so the Lord gives us 4 reasons that He's added to this commandment. The first is God's provision. He gave us already 6 days. 6 days for the other things that He's given us, right? God's allowing us 6 days of the week for our employments. That's the words of the Catechism. So the Lord has given to us 6 days. So that's one reason. The reason that we shouldn't be engaged in our work and recreations on the Sabbath days, because we already have 6 days to do it. So there's 6 whole days. Well, think proportionately, it's only 1 day when those things are not appropriate. So the bulk of our time, those 6 days, are given to serving the Lord and glorifying the Lord in our work and in our recreations. So that's one reason. What that means is the failure to keep the commandment is ingratitude. We're not thankful. We're not saying, wow, the Lord's given us all this time to carry out our other responsibilities, but I'm going to take His time. And now the time that He's reserved for Himself, only 1 day, exclusively for Himself, I'm going to steal God's time in order to use it for myself. Now, this can be illustrated in a lot of ways. One would be at work. Let's say you go to work and you punch in, you're on the clock. What if you decided, well, I'm at work and I'm being paid by my employer and so on, and I'm going to spend the next 4 hours and I'm going to watch a football game instead of meeting the deadlines and fulfilling the projects that were assigned to me. Or you have certain tasks that your boss has given to you and you say, well, I'm going to lay that aside. And this is my time. I'm going to use it for something else. Your employer would say, wait a second, you have all of the time when you're not at work to do those things. When you do those things while you're at work, you're stealing from your employer, right? That's an easy concept to grasp. Well, you can see the parallel. We're actually stealing God's time for ourselves. So the first thing is that He's given us 6 days. The second thing is God's propriety. So God's propriety. The Catechism says His challenging a special propriety in the seventh. So what does that mean? It means that God has claimed the day to be His. He's claimed the day for Himself. God owns all things. God controls all things. We are His creatures, which means we're His property, and therefore we are responsible to Him. We owe all things to Him. And He has given us very clear instructions. He's marked out one 24-hour day out of 7 days in a week, and He said, this is mine. It's called a holy day, a day that is set apart for holy duties. It's called in the New Testament the Lord's Day, right? We think of the Lord's Supper. You have all sorts of common meals, breakfast, lunch, and supper that you eat during the week. And then there's the Lord's Supper, a sacrament that he set apart for himself. And he says, this supper, this meal is separated, it's holy, and it's an ordinance that's given by me for my glory and the spiritual nourishment of my people. Likewise, the Lord's done the same with his day. He says, this is mine. The third thing is God's example. So the third thing is God's example. The Lord made the heavens and the earth in 6 days and rested on the seventh day, sanctifying it. Well, let's be honest. Let's think for a moment. God could have made the entire universe in a minute. He could have made it in a split second, a nanosecond. Or he could have made it over a longer period of time. But that's not what he did. He created the heavens and the earth in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Why did he do that? If he could have made it in a minute, why did he make it over the course of 6 days? And the answer is because he was providing us with a pattern, a 7-day week pattern, which includes 1 day devoted to him. This is actually built into the whole fabric of the universe itself, right? So you have people in France and Russia and others, more minor examples, who have tried to tinker with God's pattern. Well, we'll have a 10-day week. We'll have a 14-day week. And in every case, it has been an utter, colossal failure because they're trying to unwind the pattern that God himself has established. It doesn't work. It breaks upon implementation. And it's because God's given us the pattern himself. 6 days of work, 1 day of rest. So another reason that we're to keep this day is because of the example that God himself set and the pattern that God himself established. The fourth thing, the last thing, is God's blessing. God's blessing. So the Catechism says, and his blessing the Sabbath day. So if you think back to the last question, we said that every sin on the Sabbath is a double sin. But you can also look at the flip side and say, the Sabbath is actually a day loaded with double blessings. It's a day of double blessing. God blessed the Sabbath day. There's a unique blessing, a divine benediction that rests upon the Sabbath that is not shared in the same way or to the same degree with the other 6 days. And part of that is because the Sabbath is a day of heaven on earth. It's a foretaste, right? In Hebrews 4 verse 9, it's literally, and there yet awaits a Sabbath rest for the people of God. The Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath, is a picture and pointer to the heavenly Sabbath, to heaven itself. What will heaven be like? Heaven will be unending, sinless devotion and worship of our triune God. The time will be spent beholding the glory of the Lord. This is the most exhilarating thing that could possibly have been given to creatures, to behold the glory of the Lord and to worship at his footstool and to serve him throughout eternity. Heaven is joy. There's no sorrow, no pain, no tears. God wipes away the tears. It is a day of unspeakable, incalculable joy, a day of a time of great delight. That's what the Sabbath is. Sabbath is a little foretaste of that. We have a window every week that's carved out by God, and he says, I'm going to give you sips in anticipation of what heaven will be. It's a day of heaven on earth, a day that is entirely devoted to the Lord. And so it's a day of double, triple, quadruple blessing for the Lord's people. So that's another reason why we are to keep the Sabbath day holy and to sanctify it as God has commanded us, because it's a day of double blessing. Question 62, what are the reasons annexed to the fourth commandment? The reasons annexed to the fourth commandment are God's allowing us 6 days of the week for our own employments, His challenging a special propriety in the seventh, His own example, and His blessing the Sabbath day.